All right. So any questions that you've had with your discussion? That come up?
I think I confused myself. I heard you say that the most ideal death would be to be in a quiet place, maybe bonding with your guru, with the image of the Buddha, with the image of the sky. And then I heard you say that it would be nice to have somebody you love and trust there helping to guide you, saying nice things. And I'm assuming you mean somebody who's not a high-level Buddhist practitioner benefits from somebody they trust keeping them calm. And
somebody, sorry, what? Sorry, I missed you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I heard this, you say these two different scenarios, and I'm assuming that the one...
No, only ever one scenario.
Okay.
So what did you thought the first one was what?
I heard you say like staying in a beautiful hotel room with an image
I
of the
joked
sky.
a bit when I said
yeah,
hotel.
sure. I appreciate that.
I mean, it can be. I'm happy to book a hotel to die in. Perfect scenario, totally organised, beautiful, peaceful, clear.
Yes.
That's always been the scenario. So where's the two scenarios there?
Well, I thought you were saying I heard you say not having your partner and your kids and all that you're attached to.
That's precisely, yes.
Right.
Not having all the neurotic dramas around you, your pussy,
Right.
your pussy and your wussy and your doggy and your woggy and your husband, your kids and
Right.
your crying aunties and uncles. Berserk, in other words.
Right.
But who goes into that room is totally knows what they're doing. There are
Okay.
helpers. People understand. Be totally organised, everything that goes on has to help the person be virtuous and calm.
So the difference in that scenario is not the person who's dying, it's the people around them. So you were saying in that situation everybody's being supportive, and in the other situation everybody's being supportive.
What? I'm really confused.
Yeah, so am I.
What I'm saying
obviously.
is, the ideal way to die is not in a hospital, is not in an old people's home, is not in your house where there's berserk and medicines everywhere and messy and ugly and confusing and doors banging and different people moaning and crying and the dog there and the cat there and the music on and all the dramas. It should be really organised, really clear, really beautiful. Everything in that room should only be conducive for the person to encourage virtuous imprints in their mind, help them die peacefully and virtuously. So if your screaming auntie is not going to be helping you, keep her out of the way. Your dog and your cat will not help you. Keep them out of the way. There's no benefit. We're confused by that in the West because we think it's called love. It's called attachment, and it'll make you neurotic and freaked out. And whoever is in there, the helpers should be well educated, knowing not just nurses and doctors, but people who understand what's going on.
Right. My confusion was when you said, you and your mother love each other, you should be there supporting.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and that sounded, I understand now, my confusion.
Whoever's in there shouldn't
Yes.
be neurotic and deluded. Who's in there should be knowing what's going on and
Okay.
know how to help the person who's dying. That's the point.
Got
So
it.
if that ends up being all your aunties and uncles, bring them all in.
Okay, great.
You
Thank you.
understand?
I do.
Yeah.
I do now. Thank
Yeah.
you.
The point is, the person who's dying should be peaceful. Everything they see and hear should only help them be peaceful and virtuous. If you think like that, you'd be very rigorous in what you'd have in there and who you'd allow in there. Really, it should be controlled. Not like you're not allowed to have your aunt. No, not like that. I mean, do you get the point or not?
I do.
So say it back to me what you think I've been saying. What's the point, do you think? Because I say things in a very extreme way sometimes, and I'm not surprised you don't understand.
Okay.
So tell me what you think I'm saying,
What I think
in essence.
I hear you say is that the support staff should be well trained in not eliciting your attachments at the time of death. They should be supporting your practice.
Not eliciting your attachments. God.
Not assisting you, not making it worse. The guilty conscious, don't leave me. Don't leave me. I can't live without you.
Yeah, well, if you can understand, okay, that the person who's in the bed, let's say they're in a bed and they're dying, the only purpose for anything or anyone in that room should be to help that person be virtuous and peaceful. Can you hear that?
Yes.
So if their dog agitates them, but people, you see in the West, we think that's called love. We think having Patsy Cline music on is because they like it. Oh, that's good for them. But all it does is generate attachment. All it does is make you freak out because you've got to let it go at some point. You've got to leave at some point. And if you want to keep holding on to everything, holding on to the dogs and the aunties and the cats and the music and the dramas and all then it's chaos when you die. When you die like you're going mad. The purpose is to help them be peaceful and virtuous. Do you think that makes sense now?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are we clear? Yeah.
But also not to think this is what they, what you might want. It is their death, not yours. Sometimes, as you may have said it a long time ago,
Microphone,
sometimes
please.
just sitting there doing nothing is probably the best thing you can do. I don't know if you've ever been with anybody that's died. Yeah, so can I just say that when my mother was dying, my brother and my sister were there, and this is before I came to Buddhism, and I thought, I should be doing this and I should be doing that, but I better not do it because my brother will get angry with me. And it was only years later I realised by doing nothing was the best thing that I could have done. I wanted to get up and...
What do you mean is the best thing? What do you mean
Well,
by that?
probably because, you know, if I'd got up and agitated the room because I was trying to make it nice for her, that could have stirred up my brother telling me to sit down.
I'm really confused. Talk to me. What are you telling me?
Well,
What
what
are
I'm
you
saying is to be with somebody, sometimes, you know, to have this conducive, quiet
Talk to me.
place is good, but not to think you have to run around and make it all right. So if I burst
Whatever. If
into,
that's helpful information, that's good. Thank you.
if I burst into the room and I'm on the relly and I start crying, that's not necessarily good for Robina.
Obviously, darling. That's right. Exactly. I agree with her. Who else? I agree with you. Yes, totally. I agree with you. Yes. Yes.
My background is in death care, being a funeral director for nearly 39 years.
Okay.
But just the question about dying,
Yeah.
we see death every day, but
Yeah.
my father died, and the situation for us was a limited span of his death occurring, but he was told by me that he was going to die because he had heart failure.
Yeah.
But that agitated my mother, which she said, don't tell him, you'll get him distressed.
Right.
But,
Exactly.
But my belief was it was time to tell him so that we could speak and
Yes.
do what we had to do in a
Yes.
peaceful way. But
Yes.
but I had to get my mum out of the room because she was getting, and I'm not a Buddhist, I'm a
Exactly.
Christian
Did it
background.
work, in
but
fact? Was it good for your father?
yeah, it was a good farewell. But that's the first time I've seen anyone die. But I'm a funeral director. I do death every
That's
day.
interesting.
But
Right, exactly.
yeah, but
So
it
that
was
was
peaceful.
that was really wise. So that in the end it turned out being wise. You think?
Oh,
Helping your father
definitely.
confront the facts.
Well, I'm at peace, and I know he was at peace.
Yeah, there you
and-
go.
yeah.
Perfect. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. There you go. Well done. No, this is really helpful. Yeah, that's good. That's very helpful. No, that's helpful. Because you've got to have the courage to know, you know. Because the fact is, if your father could only go to live in denial of it, you probably have enough common sense to know there's no benefit in telling him, you know. So this is where, see, that's indicating to me too. We've got to, you've got to have some wisdom. We've got to really be in tune. We've got to be and unafraid. We've got to know the person, and not and that's very hard because with some of our own anxieties is quite strong sometimes. We can't see past our own nose. You're sort of indicating what you're saying in a sense, you know. We've got to have some wisdom, and that means you've got to be skillful with all the different people because maybe the wife can't stand to face the truth, so then you've got to make sure she's not there, you know, because that'll just make him a utter mess if she's crying and complaining and freaking out. Now this is true. You've got to, and it doesn't. And the fact is, it doesn't mean it's easy. I mean, I hear the worst scenarios of nightmares in hospitals. People who work in hospitals tell me. You know, the families and the dramas and the fighting and everybody's got their own emotions and their own agendas. I mean, you wouldn't see that because well, you see other agendas. So it's really difficult to be able to easily control. It sounds ideal to have an ideal scenario, but it doesn't mean it's that easy. Because maybe you know how to, maybe you're not the one who calls all the shots. Maybe you haven't got all the power, you know, so it's not that easy. So at least the more you educate yourself in knowing how to help the person, even if you've got 10 minutes with them, you do what you can, you know, to help them be peaceful. Because sometimes, like you said, sometimes there isn't much to do. You can't make it all right, you know. So it really is not easy. Each of you knows different scenarios, you know. That's a really good point, thank you. So I think the thing to do now is, let's go through the death process. And this will bring up a lot of interesting points, like the business about giving organs, when really a person is dead, and certainly, and this is where it affects you, how, you know, the Buddhist view of how long is it before the mind actually leaves the body, which is a very interesting topic. And this is really, especially the one of giving organs, this brings up a very interesting discussion, you know. Okay, so this description of the process obviously is based upon this view of that's also the model of the mind and of health that the Tibetan medical system uses, which is clearly radically different from the materialist view. Completely different, you know. And this is a bit similar to the Chinese idea. So like I said just briefly, you know, this process is described in terms of 8 stages. So in this model, this way of seeing a person, this includes a dog or a human, we've got gross consciousness. Mind and consciousness, like we know, are kind of they're words used synonymously. So the gross level of consciousness is our sensory and our mainly even the sensory consciousness. And now the grosser level of our conceptuality, our ability to put 2 and 2 together, you know. So this is the first of the 4 stages. By the time the 4th stage is, that's when you've stopped breathing. Well, we know that in the West is when you're called brain dead, and that's when they take your organs out and and maybe even bury you and all these kinds of things. But for the Buddhist view, if you're familiar with this, you know, after that time you've stopped breathing, it could be up to 3 days before the consciousness actually leaves the body. And from this perspective, it's very easy to prove when the mind does leave the body, but of course it's not the way we tend to think in the West, because we're not discussing the brain here, you know. And this is interesting because I remember reading a book, well, I got a book in my iPad, I read bits of it, by an American journalist called Dick Tracy, I think. And he's a very funny fellow, he's an atheist, he says, and he's done all this deep research on all the different problems and contradictions that are coming up now, certainly in the States, because of all the business of farming organs. I don't know what the right terms for it are. And it was quite cynical and quite distressing in many ways, you know, because he said, but it's good in a way because it's pointing out the evident fact that there's a lot of confusion now among all these different people in the different states and different doctors about exactly what is life and what is death. When does the consciousness actually leave the body, you know? I mean, one doctor was quoted as saying, I can say now with certainty that consciousness is not a function of the brain. I can't say what it is, but I can say at least that much. So in that sense, my sense is that's really good that this discussion is happening. I mean, you know, maybe some of you are aware the last 30 at least years, the Dalai Lama, you know, and all the best brains in the West have been having all these amazing conversations about exactly this type of thing. What is the mind? What is consciousness? And indeed, therefore, what is life and death? And so many of the Western people now, their findings and their own scientific as well as psychological discussions have really been opened up by all of this and really radically affecting what's going on in the West. And indeed, you know, even the business about neuroplasticity. A lot of this is based upon the findings of putting, you know, wires on the brains of meditators, just really looking into this thing of what really is consciousness, therefore what is life and what is death, you know. And so, for example, we know in all cultures there's always these stories, and I'm interested to hear anything you have to say, about people, so-called quote-unquote, coming back to life. So because we mean that when you stop breathing you're dead, and then there's all these stories of people knocking on coffins, and he reports many of these types of things, which is a lot of where the confusion's coming from. So have you ever had any experiences like that with dead bodies found to be alive again?
Perhaps spiritually, as a younger man, late at night the death had occurred at a home and then transferred back to the funeral home, and then before going into the mortuary, just like a bright and a warm, calm feeling about the place.
You've noticed that?
Yeah,
but you've never had experiences of people knocking on the coffin?
No.
But you've read about these things, haven't you? You've heard about these things, and all the different cultures report them. Okay, but you've not had directly yourself those types. No. But those other ones are also very interesting because lots of people have this kind of, nurses and people all talk about this kind of thing. So when you hear the Buddhist one of explanation of what the mind is and when it actually leaves, this stuff makes sense, you know. So, okay, so this process is just, keep it very simple. It's described in more detail in the book, obviously, but I'll keep it kind of simple here. The first level of consciousness is the gross, which is how is our day-to-day life, thinking, putting 2 and 2 together, the sensory, and then when we go through the process of death, as I said, it's this gradual deconstruction of these components. Now, what's totally interesting, and you'll get what I mean, is this is exactly the same process, according to this model, which is the same as the Tibetan medical system, that occurs every time you go to sleep. So, you know, for example, what's your name? Clayton. Let's say I'm having a chat with Clayton and I'm really tired, and we all have this experience, you know, as we're chatting away and I'm really tired, and you can hardly keep your eyes open, can you? Isn't it? When you're really tired and you're struggling to sort of stay like you're awake and you're noticing what Clayton's saying, and then at some point you miss the last 15 seconds because even though you're sitting up and your eyes are open, you didn't hear what he said. We've all had that experience, right? You're sitting in the teachings, that's when it's the most embarrassing. Then Lama's over asked you a question, you just didn't hear it because you're not nodding off yet. But already your consciousness, the way they say it is absorbing, it's ceasing to function. We all have that. So in this process, the very first level, different things cease to function simultaneously. So for the very first one, the earth element, as they talk about. So one of the signs of the earth element ceasing to function, and again, this is when you're tired, your body feels like lead, you know, and you kind of feel like you're sinking. When you're really tired, you can hardly move your body. Well, the way they describe this is the earth element ceasing to function. At the same time, your eye consciousness, like I'm talking to Clayton, you know, not nodding off, you're not falling on the ground yet. Your eye consciousness is ceasing. So you can, keeping your eyes open. Well, when you're driving, you're struggling not to go to sleep, isn't it? You can't hardly see a thing. And the energies, everything's very compelling going inwards, isn't it? At the same time, your ability to put sort of, they talk about here, don't make it all cosmic, the different levels of, they talk about the 5 wisdoms. Well, it's just, all that means is the capacity of your mind. So this first one, at the first stage, when your earth element ceases, the eye consciousness ceases, the ability to notice a lot of things all at once. You know, when you're really tired, and you're looking right now, we're wide awake. Our eyes are open. We can hold masses of information, can't we? Very clearly, all the different shapes and sizes and lots of information. But when you're starting to go to sleep or die, this ceases and you can hardly hold anything in mind, you know. So then, there's other things that go on, but I'll keep it very simple. The next stage, and this can happen, it's very difficult to know exactly when. When they teach this, you can never know whether it's days or a moment. It can happen in a moment. When a person has a sudden death, this happens like in an instant. The whole process of the 8 stages happens, or the first 4 happens very quickly, you know? Like Steve Jobs' story. He's chatting away and then he drops dead. So the first 4 stages happen just like that. That can happen. So other people, it goes very slowly, you know? So Lama Zopa seems to indicate it could be a couple of hours. But people say that it could be more as well, going through these first stages of the 8 stages. So the second of these 8 is the ear consciousness, you know, ceases. I'm sitting there with my eyes open, listening to Clayton, and suddenly I can't hear, because the capacity of this part of your mind connected to the different physical energies is ceasing to function. Your ability to distinguish between pleasure, pain, and indifference, you know, when you're really tired. I mean, like, you know, I think of when I'm on an aeroplane, say, and I've got lots of aeroplanes, and I'm attached to my food, so I'm always anticipating my food, you know, the meal, right? I mean, join the club here, right? I hardly met a person who's not attached to food. I really mean it, you know, it's a very rare person. So there I'm all eager beaver, you know, whatever. But if I'm really tired, the trolley can go down. I couldn't care less. I'd rather go to sleep any day, please, you know. You sort of, you know, because you suddenly don't care, there's pleasure, pain, indifference. So then at the same time, the water element, the liquids in your body begin to dry up, you know. The next stage is the ability to distinguish between friends, enemies, and strangers. So by this point, even if your auntie is on one side and your beloved's on the other, you've lost the plot. You can't tell the difference, you know. Doesn't matter anymore. And your fire element, the heat in the body, and this is where people can get very chilly. They start asking for blankets, get cold and things, you know. The heat element is ceasing to function. And the ability of the mind, as I said before, the third one, yeah, to distinguish between friends, enemies, and strangers, people who, what's going on. And the fourth one, really, and this, I said, like in these slow processes, up to 2 hours, this part, or more. The fourth time, the air stops going, you know, the breath goes out. And I know this can stay longer for some people and not go in again. The ability to, clearly, the ability to even know now who you are. You've lost the plot by this point. As Lama Zopa says, whenever you hear a word, we understand the meaning. We can put it all together. But by this point, you don't know who you are. You don't know what the purpose of anything is. You've really lost the plot. And this can be slow. So my point about what I was saying earlier before you start to really lose the plot, that's when this very intense grasping kicks in. Very intense grasping kicks in. And at this point, that is what triggers, as I said, this Buddhist view of these karmic seeds that are in the mind. This is the term they use. That will be the one that will determine your next life. So pretty much this is the period. This is the period when you really need to be calm and peaceful. And it's not natural. It's not easy to be calm and peaceful because this grasping is so intense. So that's where the roles of the people there with the person at this time are so powerful. So clearly if you're a Buddhist, that scenario would be, you know, the person who's there, the person who's dying has to love and respect you and really trust you and really rely on you and really be glad that you're there. You know what they're doing. You know the practices they do. Let's say you're a Buddhist practitioner, the person dying. This person knows that, you know, that this is where you talk about all the... Okay, let's say they're Christian. Let's say it's your Catholic mummy. this is the time they need you most. To talk about God. God loves you. Full of, God is everywhere. God is taking care of you. Look forward to heaven. This is earlier too. Heaven is beautiful. Your beloved husband is there. Your grandmother there. Just to make them happy and peaceful. To look forward to something so you can let go of this. Because you can't take this with you. At least you're being skillful and using attachment to think of the next one, Instead of holding on like grim death, having a panic attack. That's like the worst. So for the person who's a Buddhist, let them hear. Can you keep it true? Keep listening to the prayers, talk about their Lama, their Guru, whatever. But that's why you've got to know the person well and what is right for that person, And if they're an atheist or whatever, then talk about compassion, talk about love, praise them, what a good person you've been. And you've got to have enough wisdom, like Clayton's saying, to know what's right for that person. That just needs skill, clarity, fearlessness. So the crucial time is when as you're gradually losing the plot. As Pabonka Rinpoche says, when you can still hear advice, this is when this grasping begins to kick in, and just naturally fear rises very strongly. That's why they need to be you need to be sort of there, supporting them very strongly, This is the time. So the way a person behaves, they say, and I don't know, people working with people who die, if this is recognizable, but many people, especially if they are virtuous and peaceful, die very blissfully. Their mind is blissful. This example, I think, of Steve Jobs. He was blissful, full of love. He'd really come to terms with all this. He was with love, not fear, not attachment, not grasping at his daughters. Love for them, affection, which means very spacious. And then blissfully, wow, like seeing something, because the mind is getting more subtle. The Buddhist view, of course, posits this subtler level of consciousness, which when we ordinary life, when we go to sleep, when you go to sleep, which is equivalent to stopping breathing, your grosser consciousness has ceased, but then you go into the dream state, don't you? And this is weird, wacko, strange experiences for us. Well, that's what's called your subtle consciousness. That's a technical term, for this subtler level of consciousness. When people have out-of-body experiences, that's your subtle consciousness. When people have really vivid dreams, that's your subtle consciousness. Great meditators can go to that level with their own skill. That's your subtle consciousness. They can use it much more powerfully. And that's what we don't posit in the West, because when you stop breathing, you're dead. Your brain dead, So this is where the one of organs comes in, very interesting. And this particular book, the book's called The Undead. Not about zombies. It's very good. It's a very interesting book. It's fascinating, actually.
What was the author?
Dick Teresi, Teresi, The Undead.
Can I ask a question? Is it, I know there's the gross, subtle, and very subtle. Is the subtle what has the karmic imprints and what goes with the very subtle life to life?
Not like that. It's not like that, no.
All right.
It's not like that, really.
Okay.
It's not really like that.
Sorry to get
No, don't be sorry. It's just this consciousness, and there's different levels at which consciousness functions. And so this idea of, if we're talking about consciousness, we can't touch it, taste it, feel it, see it. So, talking about seeds planted on it, it's obviously an analogy. What else can you talk about, So it's your consciousness, and they can never, it's too abstract to even think about it if you're trying to analyse. If everything you think and do and say, the Buddhist view would be, it's programmed in the consciousness. It doesn't go astray, and therefore is accessible to us, which is what they mean by clairvoyance. Then it's just your consciousness, and it goes to these subtler levels. And when you get to the very subtle level, which is the 8th stage, which we haven't got to yet, then that's what takes all the imprints, all the programming, if you like, and goes to the next life. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, what's your point?
Right. I was just wondering if I'm with my mum or my partner and I'm trying with good intention to
Help them.
Yes, to help them.
That's right.
At their moment of death, and I'm saying all these loving things, whether they're Catholic or Buddhist.
Yeah,
right. I'm trying to give them these ideas, and that is creating frustration in them because it's the wrong thing for them
shut
at
him out,
that moment. So I will see that agitation and I shut it down.
I sincerely hope so. But if you're not, you better keep out of the way, honey. I said this needs wisdom.
Yeah, you did answer my question when you said that.
What?
Okay.
It's really clear, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
We can learn all this. You can go to a 5-year course and learn all these things, and then you haven't got any wisdom. You make a complete mess. Mm-hmm. And what wisdom here means, keeping yourself out of it, your own attachments, your own fears, your own neuroses, your own rubbish. It's having enough common sense and courage. Common sense meaning, wisdom is common sense, to know what the hell's going on there. And that's not easy, because we're so caught up in our own stories and our own dramas. You've got to be so sensitive to what that person, Clayton's point of trusting his own wisdom. that he trusted that with his father, you know. That takes courage to trust, because mostly we're so fearful what other people think. We don't know what to do, we're too scared to make decisions. And that's why what happens often at the time of death, we completely lose the plot, and we hand over, especially when it's in hospitals and things, we hand over all the power to the nurses and the doctors. We become like little pussycats, we've got no idea what to do. That means we haven't thought about it in advance, and we don't have enough confidence in ourselves to know what's going on, you know. It really means some kind of inner practice. You've got to have worked on your own self, I think, to have this. You see my point? It's a really important point. So by the time we stop breathing, this is the point, that's when we think we're dead. But the Buddha's view is your gross consciousness has ceased. And this is the point, until, as I said, it could be up to 3 days before it is clear. This is from the experience of the great meditators. That's how come they say 3 days. No one's just made it up. It can be 3 days before the consciousness goes through the next 4 stages of the deconstruction at the subtler level. So there's, you know, the process here, I'll just speak about it roughly. I mean, this is all just a bit abstract, you know, but I'll speak about it roughly. But no, I'll speak about that later. The general point is you look like you're dead because there's no breath. And because in the West, we think life is the body, the brain, the nervous system, the heart beating. So logically, we deduce that must be dead. And this is the whole point. This guy calling the book the I'm dead, I think it's very obvious, you know. Really fascinating. All the different experiences, you know. So he had one whole chapter, for example, he had one whole chapter on out-of-body experiences. So he says he's an atheist, he's got no opinion about all these things, but he's reporting on them, he's very good. But a whole chapter on out-of-body, which is the point being that just because a person is unconscious or dead doesn't mean there's not consciousness there. And you know, of course, with the view of the West, the materialist view, people who talk about out-of-body experience, especially during their operations, for example, which is what he's talking about, they're just totally cynical. Don't be ridiculous. Total load of rubbish, the regular medicos. Complete nonsense, you know. So this one, he reported one particular experience of one woman who had to have such a radical procedure that they had to practically make her dead to have the procedure on her brain, you know. So in other words, from the medical point of view, there was no way possible she could have been conscious. Not possible. But she reported the most vivid out-of-body experience. Most vivid, you know. And yet everywhere you read this, in all the cultures you read this, well, the Buddha's view, that's subtle consciousness. That's the level of mind that you dream with. The number of people who have clairvoyant experiences in their dreams, who can predict the future, people who go to hypnosis and can see the future, can see the past. This is completely fitting with the Buddhist view of the mind. That at the subtler level of consciousness, that level of consciousness has the capacity to cognize phenomena that the gross consciousness can't. Which includes the past, the future, beyond the senses, all this extrasensory, all clairvoyance, all this business, you know. That totally fits with the Buddhist view, completely fits with the Buddhist view. So, I remember, you know, people have traumatic experiences. I mean, a friend of mine used to, a little girl, a Buddhist, she was like raped by a father, by uncles and aunties, by the Alsatian dog, excuse me, being gross, you know. So she, you know, the way she handled it, she left her body. Every day she'd leave her body up with the fairies, watching this little body being abused, you know. This is not untypical, and this can happen during an operation. So one of the very interesting things about giving organs, and this is, you know, the essence of it all, is with that, you know, and this particular nurse who takes care of the, she's in the operation where they take the organs. So of course, because the person is considered dead, they don't give them anaesthetic, do they? Right? Because they're supposed to be dead. So there's this woman having, you know, getting ready with a circular saw to cut her from crown to, you know, from down to the whole, open up the body to take the organs. And the nurse reported that the machine indicated that the heart of this woman, because they're keeping you alive, they're keeping you breathing artificially, that the heart of the person went from 100 to 200 beats a minute. Oh. And he wondered what the heart of a dead person had to be concerned about, you know, to get anxious about. So I mentioned this to Lama Zopa because he's the author of this book, and I had to, you know, mention, and he said, because what happens, isn't it? I didn't know this until soon before the book got ready. I didn't know that it was, the sooner you stop breathing, the sooner they take the organs, the better, isn't it? Is that the plan? Isn't it? People who know about these things? Yes. Yeah. So all these lamas would never, they didn't know that, I think, because they all report that if anybody wants to give their organs, it's a really marvellous way to die because you're so generous and so compassionate, and it would really benefit you. But they don't, I think Lama Zopa didn't know this either, that actually they keep you breathing. And as he said, it's really clear from the Buddhist perspective, if you're capable of breathing in with the help of a machine, that means you're still alive. I mean, in other words, a really dead body couldn't possibly breathe, you know. And the other point that's really clear the warmth in the body. You know, one of the ways, as you go through these final 8 stages, when you get through the 8 stages, when you've gone all the way to the very subtle consciousness, before it leaves the body, the easiest way to prove that the consciousness is still there is because everything goes from the feet and the crown, gradually the heat, all the different subtle energies, and again it's described in immense detail in the literature. Everything gathers right here to the heart, right here, called the Heart Chakra. And the way we're conceived in the mother's womb and how we grow in the womb is everything starts here, okay? So as long as the mind is there, you put your hand above the heart here, it will be vividly warm. That could be a good test for you, Clayton. You get the body soon after they stop breathing, right? It's just out of an interest. Except to be in the fridge, it might be difficult. But if you put the hand above here, and that's your dog as well, it'll be vividly warm. That's the proof the mind hasn't left yet. And also the point is, it's after the person has stopped breathing, and it can be for days, that people still, they haven't died yet, but they come back, as they call it, coming back to life. All that means from the Buddhist perspective is they're not dead yet, but their grosser consciousness has ceased. But the subtle hasn't left the body yet. And so then something happens and they wake up again, you know. So the point about taking the organs is that if the person, you're not sure they're actually dead yet, and because the warmth is still there, but you don't know, they mightn't be one of those people who will come back to life, which means basically you're killing them. Now the other point is this, and I didn't ask Rinpoche about this, but let's deduce what's going on, why that heart beat faster, you know. It's kind of, we have to deduce here something. So okay. Remember I said, you know, okay, the people who are completely unconscious on the operating table, that's equivalent to death in a sense, that their senses have ceased, haven't they? And they're gross, and most of us don't have out-of-body experiences. I mean, some might have in this room, but you know, most of us when we go to sleep, we stay in our body, we have a few dreams and that's it. But some people do have powerful experiences. They leave their body. Some people have the power to go here and there. That's all people, you know, leave. That's such common experience. So the thing is, there's this person whose gross consciousness has ceased, which means their senses have ceased. So even though that's sore, cutting their body open, they wouldn't feel anything because their senses have ceased. But you think about it, it's like if you're in a dream, or let's just say you're on the operating table. Your subtle, what leaves the body and floats above, that's your subtle consciousness. That's your subtle consciousness, because you're still linked to that body. So my friend who was being abused as a very small child, she knew very well it was her body, but she literally removed herself from it. That's exactly what an out-of-body experience is. She saw the abuse happening, but she was up with the fairies, you know, because she couldn't cope. So that's what people who leave their bodies are doing. Well, then exactly the same experience here, I would suggest. This person who still has the karma to have that body as her life, she hasn't lost it. She's still, there's a connection with it. She's not dead yet. And she's observing somebody with a circular saw cutting your body open. You wouldn't feel it because you're floating above. Well, that still seems to me, because your mind is connected to the body, it could affect the heart to beat faster. This is my way of saying it. Are you with me here? But the point is, they wouldn't feel it. But that surely has to be traumatic. My friend who left her body every time she was getting raped, it was traumatic for her. Seeing this little girl looking anguished, knowing it was her body, and knowing she had to go back into it again. That's exactly the same for the person leaving their body. You understand what I'm saying? So there's still a connection. Because the fact is, later as we go through the thing and your mind actually does leave the body and now you are really dead, once you move on, Rinpoche says that there's no longer, you even would see, you can still be noticing the body. But once you've left the body and death is now complete, you have no memory of it. You don't care. Because after the death, which we're going to go into, you then go into this intermediate state between lives. And even there, you can see the body, your previous body, your family, but because the karma has now completely finished, there's no recognition of it, there's no connection with it. Whereas if you're still there in the body, and your heart's and your body's being sawed open, there'll be still an intense connection, although you physically wouldn't feel it. Are you with me, people?
Yeah.
Yeah. Microphone, please.
Sorry.
Thank you. This raises a dilemma for me as someone who has, you know, in my will, organ donorship.
That's right.
I'd like to be confident that I will be in a calm...
Right. Of
my
course.
consciousness will be calm.
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
And I'm hoping that the compassionate gift of that will
Yes,
transcend the fear.
exactly.
But
That's that's
It's a
all.
hope.
No, I understand precisely, and that's all. All I can say is I found this book totally interesting, and I mean each person has to respond in different ways, because the point is your consciousness doesn't leave for up to 3 days, and they're going to take the organs pretty much hours after you've died. So then, it could be completely fine for some people. There'll be no awareness of it and no drama. Your heart might not beat double the rate, or it could be traumatic. There's no saying it won't be. So I wish I remember the book more. I just read bits of it. But what was so interesting, he was a bit cynical about the whole thing because it's the top dogs of the medical industry. They're the ones who call all the shots, and it's all seen. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic here. It is incredibly amazing to give an organ to somebody. So compassionate and extraordinary. But because naturally it's going to be caught up with ordinary human beings and money and elitism and power, and indeed, therefore, not so concerned about the person. And as the author said, I would really wish they would spend as much money and care on keeping me alive as they do on keeping a dead body fresh so I can have their damned organs. So he was quite cynical about the whole thing. I remember one woman reported who was so moved by the fact that her baby's organs were used for other people, went to work for an organ donor organisation, but afterwards gave up because she became so upset about everything. And I can't remember the details, so you've got to have to read the book, I'm so sorry. But all it brings up is lots of dilemmas. It's interesting. So, And in the end, I've just decided that I'd rather give my smelly old, fat old dead body to let them cut me open and use every bit of me for becoming better doctors. Because it is marvellous to give your organ, but we all know that egos get involved. Then it become really political and quite outrageous, can't it? And because there's confusion now, there's no agreement any longer among people what is death and when isn't it, and which I think is fantastic because they're forcing, the discussion is being forced. So it is interesting, and I think it's therefore interesting to look into it. This book is great. And the only thing I was a bit disappointed, he did a lot of research on all the different religions' views, but he never talked to Tibetan Buddhists, which is a great pity. He doesn't have. I think he'd be very interested in this particular view, So, but the interesting one about the subtle conscious also affects us when you see the person who's unconscious or in a coma. We tend to assume in the West they are peaceful. Drug them out of their brains, they're going to be peaceful. That's a complete fallacy, Because subtle consciousness is what dreams, and you can have nightmares. And if you're stressed when you're awake, it doesn't mean your dreams will not be blissful, I promise. We all know that. So it's not that easy just to drug a person out and say, keep them quiet. Again, experience I had. One student of Lama Zopa's called Pat, who'd run the Florida Centre years ago, and 2 other students and I went to see her. Jackie and I went to see her. And she had cancer, was in terrible pain, you could tell, and very stressed. And her dear family, kind Christians, I'm not being sarcastic here, very kind people, they were taking care of her, and she was in the hospital. Well, first of all, the noise was terrible. It was just awful. She was in the front, just the first bed in the small ward. So much noise. She was you could tell she was so distressed, drugged out of her brain. And the family wouldn't let us stay because they said we were disturbing her peace, So what I wanted to do, and this is something you can think about, is remember I said about my friend Judy, totally unconscious, and yet me just whispering in her ear the names of these lamas. She remembered it. It could help. So we wanted to have Lama Zopa on her iPad, was very quietly near her ear, Lama Zopa saying prayers, because she was very devoted to Lama Zopa. So they wouldn't let us do this. And so the hours before she died, Jackie and I were there. Jackie was at the end of her feet, and I went up to her ear and just said, Judy, Lama Zopa is praying, not Judy, this is Pat. Lama Zopa is praying for you. And Jackie said it was astonishing to see the difference in Pat. She was like she absolutely heard it, So the point is here, this is where we talk about spiritual, talk about, people having visions and fairies and God and saints and what do you call, like guardian angels, all these experiences that everybody in different religions all reports, including the Buddhist one. If there are such beings as holy beings, enlightened beings flying around the sky, call them saints, whatever you want, or God, well, I don't care what you call it, then this energy is really invocable right then. And that's certainly the Buddhist view. The Buddhas are around, just saying the name Buddha, saying the words of Buddha, saying the name of your teacher, saying the name of God, the saints, whatever, can be beneficial, especially at that subtle level, No question. This is the Buddhist view. So as I said, the mind can stay in the body up to 3 days. And then what happens, so then the next section in the book, first of all in the book, there's all these different practices and things that Rinpoche recommends to do the weeks and months before, things to talk about, things to think about, Rinpoche's into mantras, like we used to have as Catholics, we'd have scapulars, and you put them on the person's body, like holy prayers and things. Buddhists view the same, mantras touching the body, having prayer wheels, having tankas, having statues, having sound of mantras, the sound of the teachings, all these different things over the period. Closer to the death, there are certain things that are said to be done. All this is all in Rinpoche's book, Then the moment they die, the moment they stop breathing, certain things to do right then, certain things to say in their ear. Then the next 3 days, to treat it like a shrine room, totally peaceful, totally private. And of course the trouble is in a hospital you can't have that. So there's different scenarios, what to do if your loved one dies at home. That's the ideal where you can afford to have your 3 days. So you've got to look into this. This is the key thing to me too, like the wisdom you need to have. But you've got to know what your rights are. We often if you just wait till the time of death, we just become like little pussy because we have no power. We don't know what we're allowed to have. But if you know what your rights are, that means look into the laws in your state or your whatever we are, and see what Adelaide allows. Can you have your body in your house for 3 days? Some states are really spacious. Some, there's hardly any rules governing it. You can do what you like, You've got to know what your rights are so you know what to do, So for example, one of my friends in Santa Cruz, the husband, the wife and the daughter were all Buddhists. The daughter's grown up and they were old. So he had a bad heart and he'd always said to the wife, do not call the ambulance if I have a heart attack. But she forgot and she did. So of course the ambulance come. And then you couldn't take the body back after this. And so he's in the hospital. The daughter and I go in and he's very distressed because they've got him plugged in. He doesn't want to be kept alive. So we say all the prayers that he wanted to say and we pulled the plug. And of course we couldn't take the body back. What do you call your places? What do you call it? A mortuary?
Funeral home.
Funeral home. Well, in America they call it the same, don't they? Funeral home, mortuary.
Funeral home or morticians.
Okay. So then anyway, they were very sweet and very kind at the hospital, so they were very gentle, because the key thing is, until your mind has left, it's best not to touch the body and best not to move the body, because that can be it could be distressing. Even though their senses have gone, it can kind of, it's best to keep it quiet and peaceful. And so what happened was the ambulance came and the mortuary is just down the road, and so they were very kind and they took the body and we put it on they call it a gurney there. What do we call it? A stretcher?
Barouche.
Who?
Barouche.
Who?
Barouche.
I've never heard this word in my whole life. How do you spell it? How do you spell it?
B-A-R-O-U-C-H-E.
That's a stretcher. That's like a stretcher.
No, it's gurney. Like a gurney.
I think it must be a South Australian word. I remember when I first came here in the 1960s, I ate some weird food that no one else had ever heard of, a strange word. And in Queensland they call suitcases ports. So I think it must be unique things. It must be, I think it's South Australian. I remember there's some kind of sausage. I remember I'd never heard of it anywhere else.
Fritz.
Was that South
Fritz
Australian?
and sauce sandwich.
I forget where anyway. Never mind. A barouche. Okay, thank you. So then they were very kind and we negotiated. This is the point about knowing what your rights are. We negotiated with the funeral home and we stayed there all day with them saying prayers for Paul. Then at 4 o'clock they made us go. And we wanted to stay all night and they wouldn't let us. So we gave them a tape of the Gyuto monks chanting. And they promised us they'd play it in the fridge. Now, would you do that if I asked you? There you go, you see. Yeah. So they said they'd do that. So we played the prayers all night. We came back next day, we had another whole day, and we did our prayers and business. So you can do these different kind of things, This is not in the book, because Lama Zopa didn't know about it. I wish I could have told him that he put it in. Because there's many things you can do. Even recently, most fascinating, one of our friends, Trisha Donnelly, did you ever know Trisha? She died, she was a nun. She's the same age as me. We used to crack jokes about being born in the year of the monkey, And then she'd retired, because we're both 70, whatever we are this year, 72 or something. So anyway, we joke about being the same age, and she just retired from running our centre in Bodh Gaya in India, and she's going to move into Kathmandu with our friend Francis and do editing for Nick Rebush until she died, quote unquote, thinking and presuming it's going to be years, Well, suddenly she goes to visit a hospital in Queensland to visit her friends, and she's got cancer, to be dead in 2 months. Sorry, mate, So a bit of a shock, trying to adjust to this. Lama Zopa says stay in Australia, it'll be fine. So our friend Yeshi Kadro, who runs Karuna Hospice for many, many years in Queensland, she was one of the people helping her die. And then when she did die, was a different story. Never mind. No, forget that. I'm sorry. Never mind. It's another story. Another person who died, Lama Zopa said, keep her in the fridge for 10 days.
10 days.
So then that means she must, because, okay, I'm jumping ahead back and forth here, but some of the people can meditate in that state. Meditators, there's a whole chapter on that in the book, who after they've stopped breathing, they can stay in their body for days and even weeks. Lama Yeshe, when he died, he was in his body for like 10 days, and the body will never rot. It'll shrivel up because the senses aren't working, but because the subtle consciousness is there and they're consciously meditating, which doesn't fit with the Western world, of course, then they won't shrivel, they won't stink, you know. So then this other person must have been meditating, because Rinpoche said to leave her in the fridge, just borrow the fridge. Do you charge rent for your fridge? So you can keep bodies in your fridge for a while?
We've had up to 6 months.
Why? Why?
Had to go overseas back to Russia and arrived in Australia illegally, and Russia didn't want him back, but we got him back.
How interesting. So there you go, you know. So that's really fascinating, because you just leave. You can easily. I see. I should have told Rinpoche this, because he didn't know about these things. I think he should, when they do a new edition, he should, because this is very practical advice. You don't have, because if the next chapter, you see, the next one is what do you do if your loved one dies in hospital? Well, you know, maybe in advance you might know if you're in the unit, your people die, your cancer patients die in your hospital. So then surely if it's my mummy, could I come to you and negotiate that if she does die, that you won't touch her, and if you've got a spare room, could I have it for a day? Does that ever occur?
Under certain circumstances we can.
But I should know my rights, not just wait till she's dead and then burst into tears and the nurses come and take over. You know, you've got to know what your rights are and know about this in advance. So then I'd negotiate with whoever, the boss nurse or whoever, if there is a spare bed, or can we have the room as long as possible? So then as soon as she stops breathing, and if you're there, or they'll call you, don't touch her, close the door, and then you spend as long as you can doing practices. And as Rinpoche says, do it, you know, even a half an hour, you do what you can. All these different practices that can be done that are recommended by Buddhists to do, you know. And then the point is that before they take the body away, and that's the point now. For me, it seems to be you can just put her in the fridge and leave them alone for 3 days. That's perfectly fine. I'll have to tell Rinpoche this is most interesting, you know. I'd never heard that before. You don't need to touch the body.
But you still have to actually prepare the body to be moved. So
but you don't have to, do you? But you don't have to. You can leave it quietly.
To move the body from the hospital room, you need to do certain things and then put them in a bag and have them physically handled. You know, you do.
Okay, yeah, but they can be gentle, can't it? You can be extra gentle.
Yes.
So as long as you're aware, and that's your instructions, and to really be as gentle as you can. Don't do the bloody cleaning rubbish and all that. Let it be dirty. Who cares? Well, you have to clean it. That's hospital protocol.
There's a Western tradition, so you have to negotiate that too.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what my point is. If you could surely, you know, ask for your, don't touch. Don't just to put them in the bag and lock them up.
The thing is, you know, can we just leave the patient be for as long as possible and then put them in the bag and get them taken?
Yeah, but do as minimum on your count and then put them in the fridge. I think I've never heard this before. It was just recently I heard this. I've never heard it before. It was very fascinating. That makes sense from the Buddhist view, because they don't care for the fridge. You know, their senses have ceased. Their mind can be there for up to 3 days undisturbed. Very interesting. So the point is, though, as Rinpoche says in the book, at least a half an hour. Do what you can. And then the point is this. You then can do something to help the consciousness leave. And this is the thing. The way they describe is that the consciousness, when everything gathers after the 8 stages of death, everything gathers to the heart chakra. The way they say you're born, what happens is, let's say Clayton. There he was, Mary in a past life, and let's say some old lady in America, let's say. Maybe he's a Tibetan monk. Let's say he's a Tibetan monk in his past life. And he's dying. What year were you born?
1962.
62. What are your mummy, this is going to be a story now. What are your mummy and daddy's names?
Faye and Donald.
Faye and Donald. I presume they're your mummy and daddy.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's Faye and Donald. So there's Clayton. There's, Tenzin. Let's say he's a monk. The past life, a few weeks before, up to 7 or 8 weeks before Fred and Kay. Faye. Sorry, Faye and Donald. Popped into bed, right? I presume it was bed. Who knows, you know? Maybe they got quite anxious and might have been in the kitchen. You never know, you know, because they knew he was coming. So they kind of leaped in, you know. That's what happens. They know someone's coming, you know. So anyway, never mind. So Faye and Donald. So there's Tenzin, and he's dying, and then the karmic seed, because he dies peacefully and virtuously, the karmic seed is triggered before he even stops breathing, then he dies very blissfully, and then he stays in his mind for a couple of days, and then when his consciousness leaves the body, I'm going to go more about this one too, I'm going back and forth, when it finally leaves the body, it immediately wakes up, like in a dream state, which is called the intermediate state, as you know, the Bardot, but he's left the body now. And even though he's in the intermediate state, which is just like a dream state, please, literally, like a dream state, but you're out of the body. He can even see the past Tenzin's body, but the karma's over. He can no longer relate to it. He doesn't want to go back to it. So there he is, this experience, and depending on how well he's practiced, it can be very anxious, a very neurotic, a very peaceful experience, but basically there's this very strong grasping, desperate for another basis of another rebirth. And then suddenly, Faye and Donald hop into bed. And so boom, from wherever he was in Tibet, wherever this intermediate state is, and the karma ripens, and he runs like a magnet. He runs like a magnet to that egg and sperm, you know. And then what happens is, when he begins in the womb, at the first second of conception, and that's when the business come together, pretty much that's when Clayton joins that egg and sperm. This might be too much information for you, but it's a good experiential example. When I was 23 and I was a hippie, living in London in the 60s, and I was a serious hippie, which meant you do what hippies do, which meant you had lots of boyfriends, you know. So anyway, I remember this one particular boyfriend. He lived in Earl's Court. I mean, so cliched, Australian. You know. He was Australian, and I have to say I didn't even like him much. But I was a serious hippie, and I sort of, you know, slept with people. But I remember it was during the day. It's even too much information. His name was Rob, and he was an architect, and he got £1 an hour. I remember I was getting £13 a week, and I was very envious of his £1 an hour. I was very impressed. That I remember. But I didn't particularly like him. But I was being a good hippie. So then I remember, the point was, I remember vividly that moment, because I didn't know, I didn't think about reincarnation. I'd give up God, I'd give up being a Catholic. I didn't have words for it, but it was crystal clear that second. I said, oh God, no, I'm pregnant. I knew crystal clear that something went inside that, you know, a person. That second I knew. It was crystal, and I remember the moment now, the room, the moment, this guy, you know, I remember it. That's when you get conceived. So Clayton would have run like a magnet to the you know, the fallopian tube. I think the egg and sperm joint. Yes. That's what I've heard. The fallopian tube. That's where he would, and that second is the beginning of Clayton. That second. So where Clayton started in his own body was what's called the heart chakra. This indestructible drop, the subtle energy of the red and the white, the blood and the sperm, the egg and the sperm from mummy and daddy. His consciousness joins with this subtle energy of that. And that he begins here. And then the person grows, the fetus grows, and all the different channels and the winds, all the different construction of this person. But begin at the heart chakra. Well, the death process, everything gathers, everything ceases, all the energies, the different levels of mind, the different levels of physical energy, everything ceases and ends up at the heart chakra. And just there, that's very subtle consciousness, and that can stay for up to 3 days. And like I said, if there's half an hour, 1 hour in the hospital bed, and now you've got to take the body away, you can tell them to be gentle, you can tell them to put it in the fridge, whatever. But what you do was, you put your hand here, and like I said, if you feel it's still warm, and it's likely it is, because most people's minds don't leave immediately, unless it's a very violent death or a sudden death. Then it probably could leave straight away, you know. But if you feel it's still warm, what you've got to do, you see, the subtle physical energy, we've got this subtle nervous system, they say. This is the Tibetan medical system as well. These 72,000 subtle channels. And coursing through these channels is the subtle wind energy, or the prana, as they call it. And our different states of mind are connected to those wind energies. And so, when the consciousness, there's a central channel, like the main one, was just in front of the spine. If it came all the way up to the crown, it would end about back here. That's called the crown. Then there's all these other thousands of channels, all kind of connected, and the sub of them all locked at different points here, all tied around each other. Here, 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 below the chakra, and several down, what they call secret, in the male and the penis, and inside for the female. And these are all called chakras, where these different channels are kind of constricting at these different points. So everything gathers finally to the heart. The rest of the body is cold, you know, and just here. And so before you give the body, unless you're going to have it kept in the fridge, like I suggested, you know, Lama doesn't say that, then you would vigorously pull here the hair, or tap there, at the crown chakra, because that can then encourage the subtle consciousness, the very subtle consciousness, to go up the central channel and leave through the crown chakra. And that's the best, because the subtle consciousness here, it will leave the body either here, through here, here, the anus or the penis. They're the main places. And depending on where it leaves is the indication of which type of rebirth. So if you're going to be born a human, the subtle consciousness leaves through the eyes. If you're going to be born a hungry ghost, a spirit, which is a really intense rebirth, they leave through the mouth. So Lama Zopa doesn't say this, but I say this: don't kiss your loved one, okay? If you're kissing like crazy on their mouth, the poor thing, that can help their consciousness leave through there and they'll be born as a spirit. That's not cool. Attachment, incredible, hungry ghost. And if it leaves through the anus, I think it's an animal, and the penis is a hell being, one or the other. So leaving from here is the best, because that can help them take a pure land rebirth. So you touch very vigorously there, hopefully encouraging the consciousness to leave from there. That's the best you can do, you know. Sometimes if it's only an hour and a half an hour, it's not certain that it'll happen. So that's where you've got to be cautious. So the next one is if your loved one gives their organs, which I've already discussed, then, you know, again, as long as possible. Our friend Tim in North Carolina, he died a traumatic death on his moped, and he'd offered all his organs, and so there he is, brain dead, and brain dead at midday. By midnight, everything had gone. I remember Lama Zopa hearing it and just saying, oh, couldn't they have left it longer, you know? So anyway, whatever, the organs one, you just have to decide this one, you know, and hopefully that your mind is peaceful and it's not distressing, and that you have left the body before they cut your organs out, or it doesn't disturb you. You just have to hope that. You've got merit, you know, hope that, that's all I can say. The other one was, what if you die suddenly? And this is difficult too, because you've got to have your wits about you. I mean, you know, nurses and doctors can be trained to do, what do you call it?
CPR.
Who?
CPR.
That one. But this, we're talking here spiritual CPR, you know. You've got to know what's going on. So if my friend Yuta, when her husband Paul collapsed in a heart attack, had her wits about her, she would have checked and noticed, and then remembered that he said don't call anybody, and then let it be there quietly, you know. But she didn't. She panicked, and that's what we tend to do. Of course, if somebody drops dead in their soup or collapses, we're going to have a heart attack. We're going to panic. Of course we are. So we've got to have your wits about you. I can't imagine how easy it would be, and then to have enough common sense to know, is there anything you can do or not? No, it mustn't be easy. It can't be easy, because sudden death means you're in the middle of whatever you're doing, and your mind can usually leaves at that moment. So that's why, you see, it's not trying to be fearful. But if we're really conscious that we are going to die at some point, and we want to die well, then it's clear that you do not want to die like that. I mean, look at our minds. Who's got a controlled mind? Who's got a mind that's always loving and always peaceful and always forgiving and always generous? Forget it. So, you know, if you're suddenly having an angry fit with somebody and you die then, I'm not trying to be horrible. That's only going to trigger a negative seed and throw you into a lower realm of suffering, and that's horrible. That's why it really is better to die slowly. It is better to be aware of it and prepare clearly until you're highly realised, you know. Yeah.
Where does embalming fit into this? Like that's...
I know, what is it? Tell me what embalming is.
Clayton can probably explain that better.
What do they do, Clayton?
Well, that's the introduction of a chemical, either formaldehyde or glutarate, into the vascular system. But for Buddhists or Muslims or certain other people, that's not a legal requirement, and we always discuss that beforehand with
so
families.
Normally you do it?
I beg your pardon?
You normally do that to most bodies?
Yes, we can.
Why was that?
Well, we would be doing it mainly for transportation, if you have to be moved interstate or regionally.
It stops it from rotting?
Yeah, it's to deteriorate to stop bacteria from commencing. Yeah, well, but it's always done with permission.
No, I understand. So the Buddhist point of view, once the mind has left the body, you can do what you like with it. Feed it to the dogs, you know. I mean, they have this type of a thing in Tibet called the sky burial, which is one of the ways, the alternative. You either get burned, they don't have cemeteries. No, they used to, in the old days, they used to just chuck a body. There's no kind of coffin. There's no sort of hole in the body, or the hole in the ground, or polite. They just chuck the body, you know, and all the creatures would eat it, whatever. But the other one was that there's certain people whose job it was to get the body and then cut it all up and have all the hard bits and the soft bits all ready, and then the vultures are up there, and when they're given the word, they come out, swoop down, eat the lot. What an efficient way, you know. So once the mind has left the body, there's no drama about the body. There's nothing holy about the body. Couldn't care less for Buddhists. So there's no harm in doing that, as long as we're confident the mind has left, you know. That's not a problem for the Buddhists. There's nothing holy about the body. Do you understand? Once the mind is left, you can do what you like. Feed it to the dogs. Yeah.
When consciousness is reborn, when you talked about the sperm and the egg, and at that point, is that predetermined where that consciousness goes?
Yeah, that's what I said. At the time of death, Clayton's death, when he was Tenzin, we can deduce he died peacefully. We deduce he had a Buddhist practice, let's just say. So the point, that's my point. So obviously I haven't made it clear. I'm so sorry. Thank you for asking. That is the point. When you start the death process, when you start to lose the plot, that is the point where this intense grasping comes, and that is the trigger that will trigger the karmic seed, in his case, that manifests, that now programs his mind. He's not even left Tenzin's body left. It's already determined that is going to be phase womb. That's the point. That's my point. Thank you for clarifying. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
That's the point. Crystal clear. I didn't make it clear. My God, thank you for asking. That's the point. Did you hear it?
I think so.
No, sorry, don't go back. I'm not shouting at you.
No. So,
did you hear the point I'm making?
Why Faye and that person? Why? I mean,
because he's got intense, strong karmic. Because he. Okay. Thank you. We've got countless lives. Keep the microphone.
Okay.
We've got countless lives, Buddha says. Just Buddha's deal, right? Mm-hmm. Trillions. So Clayton has trillions of past lives, Buddha would say. And every millisecond, anything he's said and done and thought is programmed in his consciousness and is leaving, all the things he's done is leave these seeds in his karmic bank vaults. This is my analogy. So he's got this, are we not social beings? Since we're born, we have mummies, daddies, siblings, aunties, uncles, nephews, dogs, rats. We live in a world full of many other beings. Would you agree with that? So we've got strong history with each other. The Buddha's view is karma is a natural law. Whatever arises, every millisecond of things, what we do, say and think, programs our consciousness. The virtuous actions will ripen as happiness, and the negative actions will ripen as suffering. So that can be in terms of a type of rebirth. You're born as a dog. It could be your tendencies, maybe you're a cute, kind, sweet, generous dog. Third is you've got good experiences or unhappy experiences. And the fourth is environmental. There's 4 ways your past actions will ripen. And the Buddha would say this is a natural law. No one's up there running it. He does not talk about a creator. And it surely is not random. This is a bit of a shock to us to think we've got strong karma with countless beings. So Clayton has got this intense history with Faye and Donald. From 57 lives ago, who knows what, It's not random, it can't be. The Buddha says karma is a natural law. I mean, we haven't got much about into karma today. Maybe we should, because some of you people don't know about karma, right? Some of you people not Buddhists? Anyway, okay, whatever. Okay, so are we communicating here? So there's strong history we have with each other. And it's highly complex exactly how it happens. So, if we're saying with you and your mummy and daddy, we've got a very strong history with each other. I mean, look at it. You run like a magnet to that mother's body. That's pretty intense. So the parents you get is determined by your past karma. The way they treat you and love you or hate you or abuse you is determined by your past karma with them in particular. The way the environment you live in, the people you meet, how they treat you, all this is due to your past karma. Buddha says we're the ones who are in charge of this process. Does that do as an answer?
Yes, that's really helpful.
Okay, yes. Here first. Go on, here. There's a person here, right? Please, here.
Mine's not actually a question. Back in the 60s as a nurse, when we lay somebody out, we had to put cotton wool in all the orifice. So there wasn't body leakages.
Right.
But when you were talking earlier, Robina, what suddenly came to me, maybe that was helping then for the consciousness to actually leave the, part of the...
Well, I wonder if it would...
I don't know.
No, I know, that's interesting, but I wonder if it would stop, if a bit of cotton wool would stop consciousness leaving.
I don't know, it was just that.
No, it's an interesting thought. Thank you.
It's a thought that came to me, well, maybe,
there you go.
Maybe doing that.
Who knows? You never know.
And the other thing is that somebody that's in the theatre for organ donation, it's actually the anaesthetists. They keep the body oxygenated because they need to do that.
So what are you telling? What's the
Well, it's the heart that actually stops, and it's what it actually shows on the or the anaesthetic.
So I'm missing the point here. What are you
You're
saying?
saying this person, the saw was about to come down when the heart was going up.
And?
The heart rate was going. Well, obviously the anaesthetist wasn't doing their job to report that this person actually hadn't stopped, the heart actually hadn't stopped. Because that's the indication about, when you can actually commence with the saw. Okay?
So you mean when the breathing is
Well,
going...
I didn't
so wait,
read
let
what
me
you were
explain. Now
saying.
wait a minute, I have to ask a question.
Okay.
So when you mean a person who's brain dead, they keep their lungs breathing, don't they?
Well, they need to keep the body oxygenated.
No, just a moment, please.
Yes.
I have to ask you a question. They're keeping the lungs breathing, is that correct?
Yes.
That means the heart is beating.
Well, it comes to a stage, obviously, when the heart... it's a long time since I've...
So please,
observed
somebody who
this.
knows the answer here. Does the heart keep beating while the person's brain dead and their lungs are breathing? Does the heart also beat?
Well,
That's
there's
the
no
point.
electrical impulses going through the heart, and that's their indication.
Well, how come that
That's
he's saying the heart
Well,
went
I
from
don't
100
know.
beats to 200 while they're about to cut? So that seemed to indicate that the heart beating is natural.
I think the heart needs to be beating because it needs to oxygenate
That's what I'm
the
saying.
body.
That's my
otherwise
point.
The organs are going to be dying.
Okay, there you go. So that means the heart will be beating. So I don't know what you're saying.
Just a comment. Just
Over
a
here, please.
comment.
Other questions? Yeah. Yes.
You talk about the consciousness going like a magnet from...
Well, that's my words.
Okay.
Running to Clayton's mind, once he's in the intermediate state,
Yep.
Mummy and Daddy hop into bed, and then the karma ripens, as they say, and he runs instantaneously with no moment to spare. He's there next second.
So does that mean that no consciousness stays in the Bardot
That's not
longer than
7
others?
weeks, no.
No.
Longer than 7 weeks. That's the experience of the yogis, no longer than 7 weeks. You're going to find a rebirth, whether you like it or not. And most are much quicker, yeah.
Thank you.
But not a human birth, obviously. There's millions of other opportunities. One Lama said, I find this really insane, this is intense. There's one book published years ago by Wisdom called The Tibetan Art of Parenting, and these American authors, a couple of women, interviewed Tibetan mummies about how they prepare, which is very fascinating, these Buddhist practitioners, how they prepare to even have sex. Because when you have sex is when the mind goes there. I mean, that's not the Western view, but like I just said, when I had sex with that boy, that's when I knew a consciousness had come into me. So they prepare. So they would say they'd do lots of practices, a lot of preparation, and they'd have good sex. I mean, they'd have fun sex, but they wouldn't have greedy and rough and violent and drunk and drug-induced sex, which is very interesting, because that just increases attachment, which means then you've got to attract any kind of rubbish consciousness, and you want a decent baby, please. Do you understand my point? It's very, and if you look at the Western world, I mean, we're having sex with animals now. People have sex with dogs, with each other, drugged out of their brains. I'm not being fundamentalist here, but attachment energy is running rampant. People are unconscious when they have sex because they're so drunk or drug-induced. What kind of consciousness was that going to attract? Think about it. We're dragging the human race down really fast because that's when the consciousness comes. So they prepare really nicely. They're going to have fun sex, but they're going to go do their Tara practice first. So if you're still into having your sex, you people, do that, please. Do your Tara practice first, then you can jump on your husband. Really? Do you understand? So then you attract a decent consciousness. It's a very interesting point. But the point is this, the part is hilarious. One Tibetan Lama was quoted in the book as saying that when a male and female humans come together to have sex, billions of consciousnesses that are all floating around in the Bardot who have recently passed away, and this is clearly not just humans because there aren't that many, billions of consciousnesses that have recently passed away are all hovering around trying to get in. Well, Clayton made it. Now, if you think that, you know how they had the story of the tortoise. This is a far better story than the tortoise, isn't it? Getting a human birth. Billions of consciousness were trying to get in, and Clayton made it. We made it. We should be blissed out from there on. We got a human birth, God. I love that. That's a great one. You feel a bit embarrassed now when billions of people trying to get in while you're having sex. So anyway, who's next? Next question.
Mine was
Where are you? Yes, darling.
Mine was probably quite simple. Maybe you said it was 7 weeks.
That's what they say.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how
7.
these numbers are like how these.
Okay, very good question. If you're reading, if you're studying a cookbook, how did they arrive at this? What's your answer? When a person says put a teaspoon, you go, how do you know it's only a teaspoon? Pardon?
Tried and tested.
Thank you. There's your answer, dear. Do you hear me? That's your answer. Do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. There's the answer. But it's not used to it because with religion we think it's just a belief coming from on high and you're supposed to believe at 7 weeks. Well, it's from the experience of the yogis, obviously. There's no other person whose experience we're talking about here but the people who've had the experience. Do you see? Okay. Next. Yes.
I'm wondering, and this might be a topic that you cover at another point in time, but I'm wondering if you might...
At no point in time. I'm leaving on Monday.
Okay. Yeah, I'm wondering if you might speak briefly on the different visions associated with the the different visions associated with the 8 stages, so like the fireflies.
You read it yourself.
Okay.
No time for that. It's too esoteric. It's too kind of boring. It's not boring. It's totally appropriate. It's all in the book. And for those who are going to study it in more depth, and when maybe you can have classes on this, it's important because there's not much to do with it right now. It's too subtle. I mean, I purposely didn't mention it.
Sure.
It's in the book. It's all there for you to know.
Thank you.
Go on. Next. Go, darling. Right there, next to you, on your right.
Okay. Robina, you've given me a great gift today, saying about the consciousness leaving through the crowd.
Okay.
Because when my father died,
yes,
I felt his consciousness rise.
Oh, you did?
Very
good sign. Very good sign. Very good.
And while it was happening, my mother put her hand on the top of his head to bless him.
How interesting.
And he jumped.
There you go. Now that's exactly the sign.
And I said to her, Mum, take your hand away.
No, that's good. It was perfect.
So he did, as she did.
How long did he stop breathing?
Oh, not many minutes.
Oh, minutes.
Like, it was as soon as he stopped breathing.
Oh, I see.
He did that. And his consciousness filled the room.
You could feel that. This is what Clayton was mentioning.
It was glorious. It was the most beautiful, peaceful feeling.
So that doesn't mean he's... Okay, that's interesting because it doesn't necessarily mean he's left... It could have left his body immediately. It could have. It can happen. Is that the type of thing you're talking about, Clayton?
Yeah, mine was probably 7 hours after.
What did you experience? Tell us what you experienced.
Well, we brought the person back into the funeral home from a private residence, so he died at home. And on the barouche going into the mortuary, then he's transferred from the barouche onto a mortuary tray. So that's when that movement of the body from the barouche to the mortuary tray is when the room felt warm, and then it was peaceful, and then there was like a bright
light.
Just brightness.
How interesting. No, I hear these things. I'm always trying to link it to this experience and what it could mean, you know.
And you felt like you had a connection even though we didn't know that.
There you go. No, I understand. So that could be that the mind has left at that point. It could easily be that, yeah. Could easily be. Yeah, it could easily be. That's interesting.
He definitely left.
Like you felt that. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. There you go. So it doesn't have to be even 3 days. That's the thing. So from that second, he would have then gone into the intermediate. From that second he left the body, he'd become an intermediate state being now. And he'd wake up in this type of dream type state called the intermediate state. From that second. The second you leave the human body, you go through the reverse 8 stages and you wake up, if you like, in this mini life of an intermediate state. And then you had to, like Clayton being Tenzin, you had to bop around while Faye and Donald sorted themselves out, you know. And yeah, go on.
Robina, a couple of years ago, my 25-year-old daughter hung herself.
God, the poor darling.
Oh, she was a poor darling.
Such heartbreaking.
It was dreadful.
Unbelievable.
But when she was about 14, we all knew she would one day suicide.
Because she was so depressed, was she, and unhappy, was she?
Well, we were, she was very sick and depressed and whatever. And she talked to me about, Mummy, I'm really frightened of being on the mortuary table. Don't let them give me an autopsy, will you?
How sweet. Well,
yeah, and I agreed that, if anything happened and that she had to have one, that I would be there with her.
Yes.
But when I went to go inside, my ex-husband had been in, and they were
in where? Sorry, the hospital?
Into the mortuary.
Oh, the mortuary,
or wherever it is, the coroner's
yes.
mortuary or whatever, in town, and they wouldn't let me in. And
to see the body?
To be with her. I just wanted to be with her.
Of course you did, yes.
Anyway, she wasn't buried for 10 days.
Right.
But I just wondered if any consolation would be.
Sweetheart. Well, tell me about her mind, darling. What kind of person was she, sweetheart? Tell me about her qualities.
Outrageously intelligent.
Right.
Very, like me, quite precognitive. And...
kind.
Oh, gorgeous.
Really?
I just loved her.
Oh, sweetheart.
I just loved her
Well, then,
so
darling,
much.
we just have to pray that all her good qualities were the ones that manifested when she died, darling. When did she die, sweetheart? How long ago?
Just over 2 years ago.
So there's certain Buddhists would there's always practices you can do for each other. This kind of thing.
We did one here.
Wonderful.
That was beautiful.
That can be so helpful, darling.
And I've got a son who's just so disturbed as well.
Have you
and
really?
over that, he's
really.
Yeah, and he's living courtesy of Her Majesty the Queen, so at the
Darling.
moment.
Wow.
And which is a great blessing because she's a very generous woman.
Yes.
The Queen. Free food, free
It's true,
accommodation.
I know. Some of my friends in prison feel the same way. They feel so fortunate. They can sit there and practice all day and they get their food and their, their rent taken care of.
Oh no, he's so happy. He's so
Really?
sick. Oh, it's a blessing.
Good.
It's the best thing that's happened to me. At last I know he's safe. At last he's safe,
Unbelievable.
you know.
My God.
I'm so blessed. But anyway, so for my daughter, for someone committing suicide like that, and she tried so many ways, but she hung herself. Now that wouldn't have been quick. So can you comment on what happens?
Well, darling, it's the same. It's the same thing. I mean, we just have to. All we can do, without being too depressing. Clearly with her, this is where the Buddhist view about karma. One of the ways our past actions ripen in the present is in terms of our tendencies. So we can, there you said intelligent, kind, good person, but she clearly had a tendency from some past imprint to kill herself. The fact that she keep talking about it and doing it, it's clearly there. Almost no rational reason. It's just a habit in her mind, Do you understand?
Yes.
That's all it is. Like some of us like to eat food. She had a tendency to kill. Unfortunate. So we just have to hope and pray that when she did do it, that her mind wasn't so distressed. I mean, it's a pretty heavy thing to want to do, to kill yourself, We can only deduce that it wasn't coming from bliss and compassion, was it?
No.
Unfortunate. So never mind. But, we've all had countless lives and we've got some karma with you this time, so you can do things to help her. It's okay. Don't worry about it.
Read the book for the things to help her.
I think you can do that. Certainly there's lots of things you could do, and then do them here. Medicine, Buddha, poo, does all these different things. Have you got her ashes?
No, they've been withheld from me.
What do you mean withheld? He won't give you any? Not even a tiny bit? Not even a spoonful? Really, darling? Oh, that's very painful. I'm so sorry. Because you could have done wonderful things with her ashes, had them blessed, which can be really beneficial for her. Have you got any part of her body at all? I'm not kidding now. Like a piece of her hair, anything? Nothing. Oh, darling, I'm so sorry. It's very painful. That's painful. So maybe one day you can. It's okay. Read the book anyway. Good, darling. Good. Who else? Come on. Yes, sweetheart. What's her name, darling?
Bridget.
Bridget. Good, sweetheart. Yeah, go on. Have you had prayers done for her at Copan Monastery? Talk to Gabe, please. She will tell you how, or Judy. Now, this is really super powerful, darling.
Is it too late?
Nothing's too late, ever. Never too late. Okay? Get all the monks to do prayers for your precious Bridget. Who knows? You can take her from where she is right now.
Well, people's attitudes to suicide are so punitive in our culture.
I know, darling, I know.
And the things that have been inferred to me, like the
Yeah.
suffering she's in and all the rest of it.
It could be possible, but you don't know. You don't
How
know.
does anyone know?
No, we don't. Well, it's possible to know, but meanwhile, that's not the point. To be optimistic. Remember, it says there's always things you can do. So I'd suggest you get the monks at the Copan Monastery, the thousands of monks in some of the monasteries, do prayers for her. And the more people, the better, the more powerful it can be to hook her little mind. Truly, darling. Talk to Gabe. She'll tell you how to do it. Won't you? Don't ever give up.
Okay.
All right? Really, sweetheart. Don't think that, Teresa. You're not Teresa. She's Bridget. Who are you?
There's a question.
Who are you?
Have you got the time? I'm Sheradine.
Sheradine. Okay, Sheradine. Talk to Gabe. All right, go.
Testing?
Go on.
In my nursing profession, back in the 70s, used to have to do all kinds of things with dead bodies. For ages, you'd be in the room doing this and doing that. One consolation these days, Robina, is that it's very simplified now, and in aged care, when somebody dies, it's very simple. We do very minimal to the body now, which is beneficial by the sounds of it.
Yes.
I don't know, when the funeral directors come to pick up the bodies to take them to the mortuary, they do most of the work.
I see.
Yeah.
So, from the point of view of the Buddhist one, of the mind being up to 3 days, the less you do, the better. The less invasive, the better. The best is to leave. So that is good to know. It is good to know. It is good to know. Like plugging the holes with cotton wool and everything. No, it's good to know.
None of that
very
anymore.
good. That's good. That's good.
Okay.
Good. Go on. Go on. Who else? Who else?
Please pass it back.
That's it.
Oh, I can add.
There we go. Here we go. Yes.
This isn't a question, but when my father died last year, I was a practicing Buddhist. He knew he was going to die. I got him into hospice and was taking him out of the hospital, and he was really happy. He knew he was going to die. He was giving away all his stuff, and he died within an hour. We never got him home.
Uh-huh.
But because I had contacted hospice, they were amazing. They did everything. I was able to stay in the room, do practice. They
That's
handled
wonderful. Great.
in a chocker-full hospital in Redneck, Southern Virginia. They were able to keep me the
Wow.
hospital room. They
Very
were able.
fine.
They got a local Buddhist nun
That's amazing.
from the Theravada inn,
Very
and
nice.
I was able to not have to fight for the room
Wow,
and
amazing.
stuff. So
That's very kind.
I think getting in touch with the hospice folks, even if you maybe you didn't do it
That's right.
before death, they might
Yes.
step in right
That's
there.
really helpful. You know. That's the one really, the bigger point I'm making. This is, as Lama Zopa says, this is education we all need. And you've got to be prepared. You've got to know what your rights are. You've got to have your wits about you. You've got to be prepared to know. It's like education. Like when you're educated, you know what to do, you know, and it's really important. And that's why this book is so helpful. It's like it is just education. It's a handbook. What to do when, you know, how to be, how to understand things. This is so helpful. That's really helpful, yes. So, okay, 3:20. Where are we? So there's living your life in a good way, which prepares you for death. And then dying, you know, being sick and or even dying suddenly, or dying, being ready for dying, confronting it, unafraid. And then having someone around you when you die who can help, or you can help the person who's dying. And then having, like I said, the wisdom to see what's going on, to know this person's mind well. And each person's different. Like our friend, one friend who died, you know, we had this bit of a scenario about a dying person who feels all kind of holy. Oh, I'm helping a dying person. Well, this person who was dying of terrible cancer, she didn't want to know about being called a dying person. She was completely aware. She was a Buddhist. But she didn't want to be mucked around. She didn't want holy people saying her boring old prayers. She was in charge of her own thing. She took charge of her own medicine. She knew what was going on. And even the day before she died, she said, okay, I'm going to go to the hospice now. Then she went and then she died. She was in charge of it herself. So you've got to know the person, what they want. You've got to not just impose your own junk on a person, have some fantasy romantic notions of it. You've got to know what's right for that person. And you've got to like that person. I mean, if I'm going to sit there and Gabe's dying and she can't stand the sound of my voice, I'm going to be about the worst person saying her prayers to her. She wants someone whose voice she likes, you know. You've got to really listen to what that person wants. This person I'm talking about didn't want to know about anybody reading prayers to her. So you've got to know, you know. It means you've got to have, like you said, you've got to have some wisdom. Know and if they're a Catholic, if they're not a Catholic, if they're wanting this. And even the fact is, you know, my feeling is, like say your mummy used to like God, but she's forgotten about God. And this she is stressing out, it's dying. Well, maybe she hasn't got enough wits about it to remember God herself. So you can talk about God to her. It'll be, she'll grab onto him. It'll be something to hold on to. Oh, you know, Mummy, don't sort of tell her you must think about God. But you can say, well, you know, I've been thinking about God lately, Mum. And I think I rather like God, and God loves everybody. And she probably just open eye and tell me more, you know. Listen to what's happening. But remember the point. To help the person be peaceful, which means not stressed, which means not attached, which means not angry, which means not jealous, which means not depressed, which means not fearful. That's what peaceful means. And that means virtuous, because the Buddhist view of the mind, it's logical relationship when the mind is virtuous, loving, kind, compassionate. The mind is open, the mind is big, the mind is peaceful. When you're tight and stressed and angry and worried and guilty and depressed, that's the nature of ego. And that will only trigger negativity and make you unhappy, you know. So the key thing is to be peaceful. That can be laughing all the time. You don't have to be holy, you know. It's just be peaceful. That means you've got to be like a rock, like I said, a rock. Keep all the emotions out. Keep all the dramas out. Only talk about what's useful to that person. You know, it really just means get your common sense together and want to help this person. Really, genuinely want to help this person, to be there for them, whatever they need from you. You know, so important. And then the other thing to remember, so clearly the Buddhist view, everything that our senses experience, especially this one and this one, are so powerful. And a baby could be there. A baby could be dying. The mouse could be dying. Your grandmother who's senile could be dying. They could be in a coma. Have prayers on. Have the sound of pleasant things quietly in the background, 24 hours a day. It doesn't matter, you know, because it'll have an effect. It'll leave imprints in the mind. And again, doesn't mean it'll work. Doesn't mean it'll be perfect. Maybe your grandma will die in agony, you know. You just can't guarantee. Do the best. That's all we can do is do the best. Yeah? What? Is that a hand? Go on.
No, it wasn't, but I do have a question.
Go on.
I'm a veterinarian and I deal with euthanasia all the time. And
That's
the
a pity,
question
isn't it? Where's the microphone, please? What happened to Jessie? You keep forgetting. You act like as if she shouldn't have the microphone. You don't give you permission.
I didn't give you time, Jessie. So
No, he just is not sure what to do all the time. He just sits there waiting for me to tell him.
Proper man.
Proper man.
Sorry, Jessie.
Go on. Go on.
So I deal with euthanasia all the time, and I'm one of the...
It's terrible, depressing for you. You have to do
Well,
that.
I actually don't euthanize myself. I'm against euthanasia for any convenience reasons and for terminal diseases that aren't really painful. But when it comes to like severe, we have a word dyspnea, it means inability to breathe, and the animal gets incredibly anxious, and it's a frenzy. You know, you can see it, and I would imagine humans are the same. I haven't seen that before, but you know, in my opinion, knowing the tiny bit I know about Buddhism, wouldn't it be better to sedate them and calm them down? And you know, we're basically just overdosing them on anesthetic when we euthanize.
Why do you have to overdose them? Why can't you just cut a little bit of a dose to calm them down?
So just keep them calm and then let them
Keep them calm. I mean, clearly, if you're not breathing properly, you help their poor little lungs breathe.
Yeah.
Because the practical reason for Buddhism, it's a practical reason to not take a life. It's a practical one. It's not a holy one. Try and hear this. It's a practical one. We in general we agree, do we not, that if you have to make a decision about something, you'd have to consider the consequences, wouldn't you? It's reasonable. If you're going to walk across the road, you have to consider are there cars coming? Anything you're going to do, if you're going to take a pill, you've got to make sure that it's the right pill. Do you understand? If there are going to be dire consequences, if there's even the possibility of dire consequences, you have to have a lot of wisdom. So clearly we're discussing here the Buddhist view about what happens, which is the mouse's mind, the dog's mind, your grandma's mind. It's all the same. When it leaves that body, and like we're just saying, in particular before it stops breathing, if it's actually in the death process, the karmic seed that is triggered then is the one that will throw them into the next life. If the mind is anxious and freaking out, a negative seed will be triggered. It's just logical the way they say. And if the mind is peaceful, it can trigger a virtuous seed, which can throw them into a decent human birth, and so on and so forth. So, then if you're going to give me a pill to help me with my headache, you have to be confident it's the right pill. Wouldn't you agree? If you're just not sure whether it's a cyanide pill or the aspirin pill, you would not give me the pill, would you?
Right.
Until you're certain, right? So then, logically then, the only person who's qualified to kill somebody out of compassion is the person who's got the wisdom to know with confidence that when they die, they will definitely get a really good human birth and meet the Dalai Lama and have a spiritual practice. Now, if you've got that wisdom, then, honey, you go kill your animals as much as you like. And if you don't have, then stop playing Russian roulette with that sentient being's mind. It's as simple as that. Because compassion is fine. You know, there's two things when it comes to karma. There's two things going on. So there's no doubt when you euthanize an animal, when you kill an animal, you're not doing it out of anger, are you? You're helping the animal. So there's no question that you are compassionate. But as the Dalai Lama often says, compassion's not enough. You've got to have wisdom. So you're really compassionate when you give me that pill. But if you don't have the wisdom to be certain that it's not cyanide, I'd like you to keep your compassion to yourself. Do you understand my point?
I do.
You've got to have wisdom, honey. And that's not the kind of wisdom we think about in our culture. And that's not a wisdom we've all got. That's not a kind of... So all we can do is then you be cautious. You be as... Because every second, the other point is this, every second of the animal's suffering is the finishing of that suffering. And you don't know that 3 more hours of suffering won't purify it so much for it that when it does die, it'll be ready to have a really next decent human rebirth. Because we're not clairvoyant, which Buddha says we can be, but we're not, then we can't play, it's playing Russian roulette with your grandma or the cat, whatever. And you do everything in your power to help it be peaceful, just like I'm saying. So you be friends to that animal. You want the animal to trust you and love you and hold on to you and then be calm. That can help its mind. The trouble is, unfortunately, we get our animals, and because we can't stand to see the suffering, then we think it's only because of compassion, but it's our own problem half the time. Do you understand my point? It's not an easy one. Not an easy one, you know. This is because we don't have the wisdom to see. That's it. And that's where suffering is, it sounds, because we can't stand the thought of suffering. But if we understand this view of karma, that every millisecond of your happiness is the fruit of virtuous karma. It's like seeds and fruits, it's very practical. And every moment of suffering is the fruit of negative karma. Well, every moment of suffering is the finishing of that karma. So how fantastic. I remember even giving a talk in Miami. The topic was why do bad things happen to good people? And there was me, a Lutheran, a rabbi, and a Catholic. So I just gave a talk about karma, how karma works and why suffering and why this and blah, blah, blah. And the Catholic and the Lutheran gave their talk. I didn't quite understand their answers. But the rabbi clapped. And he said, we have the same talk because he was a Kabbalah rabbi. And they have reincarnation and karma. They don't use those words, obviously, because, they don't use the word karma because that's Sanskrit. But he said, we have a saying. Every time something bad happens, we go, great, one less debt to repay. So that's the attitude of suffering. It's the ending of that karma. So that doesn't, so out of compassion. Okay, a really good story here. This is interesting. Our friend Harry, American fellow, he was at our monastery, Copan Monastery, years ago in Kathmandu, and that's when Lama Yeshe was still alive. This is like in the 80s, early 80s. And Harry there's a monk there, a Tibetan monk who was very sick, and he'd found a doctor to help him. And he happened to mention that to Lama Yeshe. Well, Lama Yeshe, who's Harry's teacher, and Harry trusts of Lama, basically Lama just said to Harry, don't get a doctor, leave it alone, it's okay. He didn't explain anything. So the monk got very much sicker, and then eventually went to the mountains. He was a Sherpa, and he died. Now that sounds like Lama Yeshe didn't care. It sounds quite shocking, doesn't it? Like Lama said, don't help him. And he died. Well, the abbot at Copan Monastery explained to Harry what was going on. So you can take this or leave this, up to you, He, due to Lama's own spiritual realizations, due to the fact that he had clairvoyance, which in Buddhism is a low-level realization. We've had that in Buddhists countless lives ourselves, which means crystal clear clarity that can see the mind of this person and can see the karma he created. So Lama could see that the karma that he created that caused this suffering was pretty intense. So if he'd gotten better, he would have had a fine life. But next life, terrible, because the karma wasn't finished. But Lama could see, again, take or leave this, that by being sick, by dying, by suffering, and then eventually dying, he cleaned up all the karma, and he died very well, very peacefully. Next life, perfect. Now that's pretty intense wisdom, if you can even consider the possibility. Who's got that kind of wisdom, So that's why it's just a question of caution. Not, you shouldn't kill. Who says? It's practical, You understand? Yes.
Does this mean I shouldn't take painkillers for my arthritis?
Well, darling, we can only do what we're capable of. So the highest bodhisattvas would happily not take a pill for their arthritis. They'd be welcoming the problem like crazy. Because we're all, babies, so we want to deaden our pain, don't we? Yeah, absolutely, it would, if you're brave enough. If you're brave enough. But we'd all be drama queens, wouldn't we? Oh, I'm being such a holy person, putting up with all this suffering. Forget it. Exactly, if you're brave enough, yes. Come on, who else? There's so much more to talk about. I don't know where to begin.
Abortion. Can you just comment on whether that is...
Abortion?
Yeah, abortion.
Yeah, darling, yeah. So so this is what... Okay, good, I better finish the story. Now, personal stories. I aborted that baby. That's my point. I was 23 and a hippie. And all I know is I said to myself, that person, Earl's Court, pound an hour, Rob, architect. I didn't think of it as a person. I didn't think of it as a soul or a consciousness. All I knew is it would come out as a baby and I didn't want a baby. That's all I could think of. You understand my point? I did no way I wanted a baby. It was a no-brainer for me. This is personally at the time. So at that time, it was 1968 in London and they'd just started the National Health, so there was free abortions. Well, I was very happy. I went to the Charing Cross Hospital. I made some story up, so they gave me an abortion. Now, what was interesting is, again, more personal, just talking, doesn't matter, whatever. So that was a sentient being. It was a mother. It was a real... So that's like, let's say Faye didn't want to get pregnant. So this is exactly the point. There's Tenzin, the Tibetan monk, dies. Karma ripens between Faye and Donald. It's tense history from the past. His mind runs like a magnet to wherever it was. South Australia, was it? Okay, Faye and Donald in bed, and his consciousness, karma ripens between these three human beings. And then Faye decides they don't want a baby, so she kills him. So of course it's a human being. So obviously though, one of the factors of karma, and in my case the same, is how much pain the being can feel. So I mean, my baby was 12 weeks, so that's got senses and feelings and legs and arms, hasn't it?
Yes,
well, I didn't think about this. I just knew I didn't want a baby. So I had an abortion, and then they didn't do it properly. They had to do another D&C. So can you imagine the torture for this poor baby? The poor little thing wasn't scraped out properly. And even I remember later, it was very interesting. My sister and I, we both worked at this time when all these nursing homes, these evil people would then use the law to do abortions. And even though it was free, all these guilty working class people, we worked in this clinic. And these wretched people, they were so evil, they had a certain number of abortions you're allowed to have in a day, and they charged money. This is like 40 years ago. They were charging £250. Must be like £2,000 now, If I was earning £13 a week, and abortion cost $250. I mean, we worked there. We worked there helping these poor all the guilty working class ladies from Liverpool and places coming because they were so ashamed, thought they had to pay for an abortion. They could have got it on National Health, but never mind, that was an incidental point. Because the point is, these wretched doctors, the owners of this clinic, they had 10 times more abortions they were allowed to have. They didn't even give them any pre-med. All the stretchers the barouches were lining up in the hallway of the nursing home, and they would pride themselves on doing 3.5-minute abortions. Well, can you imagine these little fetuses being thrown into the? I mean, it's kind of cynical because they all made this masses of dollars, masses of pounds on it. It's so awful, Anyway, the point is, there it was, a human being. I had karma with this being. So there's a sentient being coming to my womb, won the lottery, got the human womb. But due to its own karma, this is the point about karma, due to its own karma, from its own past killing karma, and karma with me, I had the karma to kill it, So it must have suffered. I had to have another D&C. I remember the nurses were so kind to me because it's all free. I stayed there for 10 days. They kept me there, gave me a private room. They were so sweet because I got depressed. I didn't know why I was depressed. I couldn't think of it, whatever. So yeah, of course it's a human being. But obviously, if it's only 12 weeks, there's some suffering, but it would have been bigger, being more suffering. So depending on that is the karma I created. So clearly, purify it, regret it, and all those kind of things. I've never had one since. Haven't killed anything since. So yes, of course it's killing, darling. Do you see? Yeah. Yes.
What about the people in the operating?
What about them?
Well, I just want to ask about, the surgeon.
Yes, the question.
And the question about any karma.
What's the question, though?
Well,
give me the question.
Okay, they set themselves up as a doctor going to do abortions, all right?
So it's a doctor who gets the forceps in and pulls out a baby. So what's the question?
So is there karma arising for them?
What do you think?
Because of
What do you think? Tell me. What do you think? It's a no-brainer.
What's on their motivation of why
clearly,
they want to
what
set
do you
them
think you're doing? Their motivation is money, dear.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
They'll
What
pride
about the
themselves.
other people in the theatre?
What about them?
Well, because
darling,
if you're
listen,
there,
darling. You're a
if
Buddhist.
you're working,
Excuse me, you're a Buddhist. You are. You've been around here for centuries, haven't you?
Centuries.
Well, there you go. So listen, shush, listen. You must know the answer to this. Every millisecond of what any sentient being says, thinks, does, etc., sows a seed. There's your answer.
So if you're involved in anything, not consciously setting up to do that, but you work in that area,
whatever's in your mind is the karma you're creating. Every sentient being, whatever we think.
How does one purify that if one's been involved?
You've been in the centre how many years? Excuse me, being rude.
Oh, off and on for a few.
You've never heard of purification.
Yeah, I said
You've never heard of the four. You've never heard of the 4 opponent powers.
Mm-hmm. Can't remember what they are though.
That's right, exactly. I think you better start, Judy. You better having 4 opponent powers classes. There you go. Of course you purify. There's no karma you can't purify. There's no karma we can't purify. There's no thing we do that isn't karma, and there's no karma we can't purify. It just goes without saying. That's regretting, having compassion, doing a practice to purify, and vowing not to do again. That's the 4 steps. You've done that one, haven't you? That's right. That's the answer. Yes, down there. Yes.
This might be a really stupid question, and I'm sorry.
Oh, you be stupid, darling. It's all right.
Does anybody knowingly choose a life with a lot of karma to get rid of their bad karma?
Knowingly choose. So you mean there you are. There's Tenzin dying as a Tibetan person, an old grumpy old Tibetan practitioner, let's say, and he's going, I think I'm going to get born in Faye and Donald's family, and I'm going to. So if he is that level and he's chosen it, then he's a highly realised being. He's in charge of the process and he's got nothing to worry about. But darling, most of us don't have choice. We just run like a magnet to the situation that we already created. So if we do get born to a mummy and daddy who abuse us, like my friend who got raped by mummy and daddy and dogs and everything, she created the karma to get born a human. That's amazing. But she secondly created heavy karma from having harmed in the past to have that type of thing happen to her. Whatever happens to us, good or bad, is the fruit of actions like that. Buddha says we're the creators of our own universes, our own experiences, our own happiness, our own suffering. So if you do choose it, you're a highly realized being. That means you know how to die, you know in advance, you know, Clayton must have chosen his womb, he knew he'd go to Fred, he knew he'd go to, you know, Donald and Faye's. Do you understand? Choosing is a serious word. Yes, we can eventually choose. And even some great bodhisattvas can choose to be born as, like, say, a very suffering person to purify their karma. To purify their karma, they're happy to have that. But we don't mostly choose. We're just on a roll, you know. We just sow seeds and get the results. Do you understand?
I do. Do you mind if I ask one more
Go, darling,
question?
of course.
With your using the bank reference for all the seeds of karma, if you use up your good ones trying to do this purification process at the end of your life to get a better incarnation, does that mean...
Use up. You never use them all up.
Oh, you don't? Okay. So that was my question, really. And then the bad ones that you have, do they just kind of hit you later at the end?
No, okay. And it also sounds so quite strange, you know. If every millisecond of whatever we think and do and say doesn't go astray, leaves imprints in the mind, leaves memory in the mind, leaves seeds in the mind, then every negative action will ripen as suffering and every positive one will ripen as happiness. So our job is, the very first level of practice in Buddhism, is first you refrain from at least sowing more negative seeds. And then you purify the ones you've already planted so you get ahead of the game. And then you start to sow the good seeds. So you kind of, there's a way of getting ahead of the game. At a certain point in your spiritual realizations, you will not be able to fall back and all the seeds will not get ripened. But that's a long way to go. So we've got to keep getting ahead of the game. Do you understand? Like in those movies, you know, when like in those movies when there's a big tunnel and you're running ahead of the ball of fire. You've got to keep ahead of the game, okay? Do you understand? Okay. And it's possible to keep ahead of the game. Keep refraining from doing negative, purify the negative you've already done, sow lots of virtuous, but keep getting a human birth. If you get into the dog's birth, you've lost the plot, so just keep being human is the best. Then you can do enough to get out of it and go beyond it. Then you can help others as well. So it's all possible. Be optimistic, okay? I don't know, it's not time to go, but it's sort of time to go. We've got masses and we've got more tomorrow. Unless someone's not coming back tomorrow and you have some questions. Yes, sweetheart. Yep.
In the industry that I work, like I mentioned before, aged care, there's something else that's very positive that goes on, and that is a thing called comfort care for people that are coming to the end of their life. Now, if they're at least receiving comfort care...
What's that mean, comfort care?
Comfort care means if they're in extreme pain, so they'll be in distress coming up to the end of their life. So,
mental or physical?
Physical.
Physical pain, then?
Physical pain, so then they put on what's called a Grasby or a Nicky pump.
Who?
You're in South Australia.
Palliative care pump.
It's a Nicky pump.
A Nicky pump?
Yeah, it's got a syringe in it, and the syringe has midazolam, say for example.
A drug?
It's a drug.
So what, you press the button, you get a drug?
Yeah, press the button, and over 24 hours it pumps out a certain amount.
So you can do it yourself?
No, you have to be a qualified registered nurse.
So what's the point here?
Well, the point is that would be beneficial for the older person or the patient coming up to the end of their life. It's called comfort care.
Why would it be beneficial?
Because
necessarily?
They're not distressed, and at least
they're
physically they're not distressed.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean their mind is peaceful. It's okay, I'm not complaining. I think it's wonderful we can stop the physical. But it's the mental pain is another whole discussion, and it can be helped by having less physical pain. But you've got to have tools to help your mind. And that means you've got to, I remember, you've got to be having tools to help your mind, and that's where you need people to help you. Because drugging yourself out of the pain is one thing, but if you're full of distress and anxiety and guilt and shame and anger and all the rest, then nothing will, no matter how, you have no physical pain, you're going to be out of your brain. We know that. But I think in the West we're so familiar, we don't make that clear distinction. We tend to think the distress is coming from the physical. And then when the physical is calm, the person's peaceful. Not true. I know you know that, but it's not true. You've got to also work on the mind. So the nurse's job is probably to do both jobs. We've got to work on the body, but this is the job to help people's mind to be loving and compassionate and patient and clear and confident and calm down and not panic and not be anxious and not be guilty. That needs conscious help. And that's the helper's friend. That's the helper's job. Isn't it?
Yes,
You see my point?
And
but to help the physical is fantastic. Yeah.
I'd like to look at the positives of our nursing system.
Well, but it's not as if by saying you've got to help the mind criticises the negative. Is that criticising the nursing system?
No, it's just putting out the positive.
Yes, fantastic, yes. But you see my point, don't you?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Very much so.
Fantastic, darling.
Quite often the relatives can be surrounding the person, like I know a loved one, a father who was dearly loved by 3 daughters.
He was?
A father who was dearly loved by 3 daughters.
Dearly loved, yes.
By 3 daughters.
Yes.
The daughters were growing. He was a very old man.
Yes.
And he had dementia.
Yes.
And they bunked in his room for up to 3 nights.
Amazing.
And
to help him.
just
Fantastic.
just to be
That's right.
around.
Wonderful. That's right. Fantastic.
It was good.
That's right, absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you so much. What else? That's it. I mean, we've touched on a lot of things, but bits and pieces all over the place. So much coherence in it all. I'm sorry. Yes, go on.
Robina, I wanted to say, following on what the lady at the front was saying about the extreme breathlessness at the end of life, and I learned a lot from my husband's death last year, a year ago. He died of lung cancer, and the last 24 hours were, as you can imagine, very extreme, very intense.
Yes.
Hunger for breath, and he chose the nursing staff. He was in hospital in Royal Adelaide, and they did a fabulous job.
Amazing, yeah.
Fabulous.
Yes.
He chose, when they offered him medication to suppress the area of the brain that panics when we don't get enough air, he chose, yes, I'll have that, but not so much that I lose awareness.
Good, wonderful.
I
Very
want
good.
to stay aware, and I want to stay aware of Margaret here.
Perfect.
And so he struggled on, and with the medication, he managed to rest. You know, gradually his breath got a little quieter. We had talked through the night about, now and then, about him letting go when it was the right time for him.
Yes.
And he said, I want to, but the body keeps fighting.
That's right.
Yeah, he was so wise. And
did he have faith in God or anything? No.
Pardon?
Did he have faith in God or anything? No. Did he have faith in God?
Yes, he did. And
That's
he was
important.
very trusting, loving man.
Fantastic.
Fantastic karma.
Good.
And so he slept for a while, and then he roused up, and I said, I'm here, my love. And he, we had talked about that towards the end, even though it's a struggle now, it does get calmer, and it's very peaceful, because I knew that from my dad's death.
Yes.
And the dear man, he was able to trust that.
That's right.
And trust his depths.
Yes.
And his God.
Yes.
And he just rolled over. He rose up and he gave me a kiss, and then he rolled over in a fetal curve and let himself go.
There you go, darling. Perfect.
With awareness.
Perfect. That's it. Perfect.
In a high state of love and
Wonderful.
awareness. And
there you go.
so I say to the lady at the front, there were many times that night when I wished he could die. I just couldn't bear the suffering of watching him suffer.
Yes.
And yet, the question I now ask the universe, like if he hadn't gone through that, maybe he wouldn't have had that amazingly wonderful death at the end.
I understand.
I'm sure he's gone on to a good rebirth.
I understand, darling. I understand.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect. All these stories you're telling. Thank you so much, everybody. So what else before we finish today? So I don't know. We'll do, tomorrow I think we just go to more, maybe we just, I mean, I don't know, I keep saying more detail. I suppose I'm giving detail all the time, aren't I? I mean, has it been too chaotic? Have you got anything from this? Okay. Okay, so maybe whatever, we'll see what happens tomorrow then. Maybe we'll go into more detail about karma and how it works. I don't know, maybe that's interesting. The 12 links, maybe there's more, I don't know, we'll see what happens. See what you want. I don't know. More, I don't know. More, okay, we'll talk more certainly tomorrow about the things you can do after the person's dead. What you can do once they've stopped breathing, what you can do the memorial, what you can do with their ashes, what you can do even after they've stopped, even after they've left the body. There's lots of those practices. They're all in the book. They're all in the book. As I said, Lama Zopa is infinitely optimistic, you know. We can discuss all that. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, everyone. All your kind stories, all your optimistic stories. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So may we be ready. May we realize that we are dying and want to live a good life for our sake and therefore the sake of others. And to be unafraid, okay? And the more you people talk about it, you all had experience. I haven't had much experience about dying people. The biggest lesson is the key thing is to say to ourselves, that will happen to me. That is the real learning, you know? So I think that's when death gets closer, isn't it? Ants die and neighbours, foreigners die and terrorists die and strange people die. But when the loved ones die, even still it's not close enough until we say, that will happen to me. Then it really becomes a teaching for ourselves. And that's the key, isn't it? I think that's the key. That will happen to me. That will happen to me. To learn from it, you know. So I can be ready. And whether you have faith in a creator, whether you're a materialist, whether you have confidence in karma, you know, to confront, to greet it, not be afraid of it. Because fear is the story. Fear, the attachment, is what causes the suffering, as Rinpoche says. Attachment to this, attachment to the body, attachment to the loved ones, attachment to that's what not letting go is. So when we've got letting go, not attachment, there is no fear. Not attachment, there is no fear. And then secondly, to be thinking of the future. If you've got confidence in God, think of heaven. If you've got confidence in karma, think of the human birth. Work out what you want. Work out what kind of womb you want. Work out what kind of pure land you want and plan it. Because karma is said to be a natural law, you know. So then less fear. Therefore less fear. It's like dropping this body and taking another one. No drama, you know. So maybe all of us be ready for that. Kewadinyu dudar lama samge drugyune drowachikyang malupa dei sala gopashok Jangchod Semchog Rinpoche Ma Ke Panam Ke Yuchik Ke Panyam Pa Me Payang Gom Ne Gom Du Pavasho. Okay, thank you so much everybody. Thank you.